So not that long ago, I had read a short story and it had horror that had to do with like the woods. And at the time, I was like, I need to read more horror that has to do with like horror in the woods. And so the book that we're going to talk about today, a good chunk of it is horror in the woods, and it is the book called This Wretched Valley by Jennifer Kiefer. Jennifer Kiefer is also the owner of the horror bookstore that is in Kentucky called Butcher Cabin Books, which one day I hope to go there and visit it because it seems really freaking cool. I think it's like a 12-hour drive from where I'm at, which is far, but not that far. So one day I picked this book up because I kept seeing it everywhere. It seemed like everyone was reading it. And I like the cover. It's got, this skull and someone's hanging off the rock face. And so it's a horror that revolves around rock climbing, but also a good chunk of it is in the woods. So it follows these characters. There's this guy, Clay, who used to be a climber and used to do rock climbing, but now he is getting his PhD in geology, and he's trying to put together his thesis or dissertation on finding different like rock climbing walls around the world and country. And he finds this one that no one's discovered before. And him and his friend, who is a pilot, were out and using LiDAR, which is a technology that can kind of like see through the trees. It's something recently, I remember I was watching some sort of special that was on like National Geographic where they discovered like more Mayan ruins that they hadn't known about before and whatnot. So it's a technology like that. So they discover this rock climbing face, and then he gets together a team that he's going to bring with him. So it's him, and then there's Sylvia, and she has a great knowledge of plants and things of botanical nature. And then he has his climber named Dylan, and she's bringing her boyfriend Luke, and then their dog Slade. So they're gonna go out there, they're gonna kind of like catalog what they find. Dylan's gonna climb it. She just got a sponsorship by this company, and so she's new to the sponsorship. She's gonna go and like map this wall, and she's gonna, stream it out to her Instagram followers and all that good stuff. So everyone meets up, and they're on the way to this spot that is in the woods in Kentucky. And so they go, and before they're going out too, there's a few red flags that happen. The first one is when Clay is flying over and finds the spot for the first time. The plane he's in seems to have a little bit of turbulence, a little bit of troubles. They get through it, and they're like, wow, that was weird. All right, so, they don't think much of it. So the group's together now, and they go to this diner before they're gonna go out to the woods. And they start talking to the waitress there, and they tell the waitress where they're gonna go into the woods to go do their rock climbing, and tell a little bit about what they're gonna go do. And she's like, oh, is this like a last meal? And they're like, yeah, kind of, sort of, that kind of thing. And they don't see any of the ominousness of what she just said. As they talk to her a little bit more, and they tell her exactly where they're going, like off this specific highway, she's like, oh, a lot of people that go into the woods in that area, they don't come back. And if they do, they don't come back the same. Something ain't right with them. And so they just, they don't really take too much stock in that, like, oh, okay, local legends, it's haunted, woo. So that was another red flag. And so they get to the spot, and they start going through the woods, and when they get there, the dog is going like insane, crazy, and does not seem like he really wants to go into the woods, and just behaving how he doesn't normally behave. So there's another flag, but they don't think too much of it. And so they start trekking through the woods, and they have their GPS to get to these coordinates, and the GPS doesn't seem to be working quite right. And it seems like as they go through the woods, everything looks really similar. Like they've passed the same tree with the same exact pattern of like mushrooms near it several times. It seems like it's just like the fabric of the scenery is like knitting upon itself and whatnot. And at some point they get a little like, annoyed with each other, and they're like, are you sure this is out there? And they can't see any kind of cliffs or anything like that. And they keep going and they keep going. And finally they come into this valley, and there is the big cliff face rock wall. And the girl who's a climber, Dylan, she's super excited. It looks amazing to her. She thinks it looks really similar to this place called like Muir Valley and whatnot. So she's super stoked. Everyone's just happy to be here. They all set up camp. gets settled in. Everything seems to be all right. The next day, Dylan sets about to start to climb the rock. She makes it up so far, and I can't remember if it was this climb or if it's like the second day climb, where she gets at this point where it seems like she's just going in a loop over and over and over, and then she falls, but she's okay. And then stuff just starts to get weird. Oh, also, dang it, I forgot this part. So when they wake up this day, the dog is missing. Dylan got up early because like the cliffside was calling to her. She almost felt like there was a pulse to it, and she forgot to zip the tent back up, and the dog disappears. And then they can't find the dog. No trace of it whatsoever. And then her boyfriend's kind of mad at her because that's like the dog's his best friend and whatnot. And they look a little bit, but then not that much. And she's like, if we move around, then, you know, the dog won't find us and this, that, and the other. So we might as well just kind of get on with the day, you know? And like this cliff face just seems to be calling to her, and she doesn't seem to care as much about the dog. So the boyfriend's kind of a little bit pissed off about that. But anyway, so she goes and she climbs, and she seems to be in this like weird loop. As the days progress, so she falls, and then they call it quits for the day to not do any more climbing. It seems that weird stuff starts to happen, and maybe they start to see things that aren't there. Stuff gets real weird. There's a spot by the cliff where there's like this big, like, looks like what is wood, and it seems to be petrified, almost like it was the foundation of a house that used to be there. And as you get more into the story, you get a little bit of the history of what happened in that valley. But a lot of it too takes place in the woods, because they have to go in the woods sometimes in search of firewood, or just, you know, maybe thinking you see someone or something in the woods and whatnot. And it's also really weird too. So the girl Sylvia, who is the plant researcher, notices that there is an uncharacteristically amount of poisonous, toxic, and hallucinogenic plants in this area. Like a weird amount, way more than there should be, and also plants that shouldn't even be in this climate to begin with. So strange things are abounding, and eventually it seems like something is out to get these people, and the land seems to want to maybe feed off the blood of people. I don't know what happens. It's crazy. The horror is, it's part of the land, the history of that land, what happened there. And you get like little tidbits like from like the 1700s that like the Cherokee and the Shawnee knew not to go in that area. But if the white settlers came and they were going that way, they wouldn't warn them. They let them go on their merry way into that area of land, which seemed to be a very maybe alive and evil piece of land that almost was like an island that floated around, that was there and then it wasn't there at the same time, and maybe had like liminal qualities where it is in different phases of time. So there's so much strangeness in it. Like that land is somewhat alive, and then there's the weird time elements of it where maybe you're catching ghosts from the past that are flickering into the current time and future, and just it's so weird and creepy and awesome. And reading this, you know, I go camping every year, so when I read stuff like this, it kind of freaks me out, or I'm like, don't go that deep in the woods. Usually we just go to like national parks, so and park, and we don't go to like off the beaten trail in the middle of nowhere and camp, because I don't know, I haven't got to that level of camping yet. I get too paranoid, especially because I'm super into like reading about like cryptids and UFOs and whatnot, and I think I would be too absolutely paranoid to stay out in the middle of nowhere with no other like people around in campsites to go camping, and just reading books like this makes it worse. But I love books like this at the same time. So yeah, another one that I had read that was in the woods, like a woods horror, was Hunted by Darcy Coates, which awesome. That is probably one of my favorite Darcy Coates books. This book was freaking fantastic. It was super creepy. It was really weird. I liked the characters. I like how the story evolved and where it went. Oh, it's just such a great horror in the woods. And in the valley too, because you're in the valley and the rock face. But the woods, man, is creepy. Don't go in there. They won't let you out. So if you also crave horror in the woods like I do, this Wretched Valley by Jennifer Kiefer, I thought it was fantastic. Like I said, I saw everybody reading it. Everyone seemed to be having a good time. I had an absolutely good time. So if that sounds like something you might be interested in, definitely check it out. And if you are a fan of Horror in the Woods, another one too that I just mentioned, Haunted by Darcy Coates, that'll be the next video coming up. If you want to check that out, stick around. And if you had fun hanging out today, hit that subscribe button, come back, see me again, and we'll talk about more bookish things and weird stuff.